Hello everyone, today I'm going to explore one of the not so good parts of East Berlin, and I actually found this part of town by mistake when I got off at the wrong subway stop on my way to the Checkpoint Charlie exhibit, which is not very far from here. And this is the Kottbuser subway station that I just exited. And prior to this, I didn't realize Berlin has such a large ghetto area. I knew there were some homeless people in downtown Berlin, but for the most part, they don't really seem to bother anyone. And I also knew there was some graffiti on the bridges and railway overpasses and such. This area here is just covered with graffiti, and they even get up on the rooftops of these buildings to spray graffiti, and even the churches in the area are not immune to the vandalism. And I should also point out that some of the locals in this area really don't like to see cameras, and especially over by the Gorlitzer Park, which I will get to later. And that area is rather infested with drug dealers and drug users, and I don't think they are only selling and smoking just marijuana either. I think it could also be other hard drugs as well. Anyhow, prior to my visiting Germany, I always thought countries like Germany and Japan, who at one time were allies, were rather strict, and I certainly wouldn't have thought crime, even low-level crime like graffiti, would have been as accepted as it is here. And it doesn't seem like the police put a whole lot of effort into stopping it, or the drug dealing, which is done pretty much out in the open. And it's also interesting to see how the demographics in the area change as well, as there is a higher percentage of refugees and foreign nationals in this part of Berlin. And it appears the police just seem to tolerate a certain level of crime, or the laws just aren't enforced as much here as they are in other parts of the city. And also note, not only migrants live in East Berlin. As you can see, there are lots of other people here as well. So it is indeed a melting pot of sorts. And Germany is actually one of the most popular destinations in Europe for immigrants from pretty much all over the world, not just for those seeking the refugee status. And some of the reasons cited for moving to Germany include the country's vast industries and the availability of jobs, the high quality of life, and the overall acceptance of foreigners in the country. And contributing to that high quality of life in Germany are the numerous government social programs that aren't available in most other parts of the world. And Germany is the home to the Guaranteed Minimum Resources Program, and what that does is it guarantees everyone, young, old, middle-aged, a minimum income regardless of whether or not they are employed. For example, someone who is single and unemployed currently living in Germany can receive a monthly benefit of up to 502 euros each month. And there is no time limit to be on this program. It's not like the USA's welfare to work programs. There's no hurry here to find a job. Plus, on top of the guaranteed income program, every German citizen is entitled to free housing and free health care as well. And if you have children, they also get paid extra for that as well, up to approximately 348 euros per month per child. So they have some rather generous welfare programs here in Germany. And for a country or for a family of four, the monthly state support, including housing and health care, can cost the state up to 4,000 to 5,000 euros per month. And as of the latest available figures that I have from, or that I was able to find from 2017, nearly 1 out of every 10 people in Germany, or about 7.6 million people total, received the guaranteed resource benefit payments. So this is a very large program, and in the future, if the German government ever needed to make any budget cuts or any reductions to these programs, that would likely spell trouble, just because so many people do rely on them. That's about 10% of the population right there. And even a larger proportion of the population are low income or at risk of requiring government assistance, with about 21% of the people in Germany earn less than 16,000 euros per year. So basically, you almost kind of get into this situation where the welfare pays more than working, after you factor in such expenses as taxes and commuting expenses. And Germany also has other many generous social programs here as well, such as every new mother is eligible for up to 3 years of paid maternity leave, and they also have a mother's pension, which basically pays old mothers for raising and caring for their children. So there's some pretty interesting ideas here, and social programs. And what's odd about all that, though, is you would expect that with all these generous programs, people in Germany would be having large families, but actually the opposite is true. And Germany has one of the lowest birth rates in all of Europe. And there's even other social programs as well I haven't covered yet, such as there's free college tuition, free child daycare, and they have a very generous unemployment benefits program that pays 60 to 67% of the employee's previous wages for up to 2 years. And then if you still can't find a job after those 2 years are up, you would qualify for the guaranteed minimum income program that we were just discussing earlier. And that program bills itself as the minimum subsistence program for human beings. So it's just basically meant to be a giant safety net for everyone, and you can't drop below a certain point, basically. And though 502 euros, which is about 600 US dollars per month, might not be getting rich, the program does succeed in allowing people to live at a minimum subsistence level. So there are some rather attractive programs here in Germany that are pretty appealing if you're coming from a third world country. And then other German social programs are rather more modest, such as the German equivalent to senior social security benefits, which pays the average pensioner only about 856 euros per month for women and about 1,203 euros monthly for men. And that's a bit less than most of the pensions in the US. However, when you add up all the other benefits, it's very likely many Germans still have a higher quality of life than many of their counterparts in the United States do. And up until now, Germany hasn't had too much difficulty paying for all these government programs, though that too may be changing soon. It's expected within the next 10 years, the number of people over the age of 67 is expected to increase by about 25%, by 4 million people to 20 million people. So right now it's at about 16 million, so it's about a 25% increase. And The more senior citizens that they have means fewer people who are working and paying into these generous social programs. And all this sort of ties into why the German government has welcomed and even encouraged immigration to the country in the past. So basically, they're faced with, on the one hand, they have one of the lowest birth rates in Europe, and then they also have an aging workforce and aging population. So Germany, they pretty much need a certain level of immigration just to maintain their current population. However, the opening of Germany's borders also appears to be a bit of a gamble too, as well. And just some background on the overall situation. As of 2019, approximately 1 in 5 Germans, or about 14 million people, were foreign born. And that is a substantial change from previous decades. And much of this change has actually occurred fairly recently, within the last 5 to 10 years or so. And what's also interesting is where Germany's foreign nationals, where quite a few are coming from. There's several Middle Eastern countries that make up the top 10 list, with about 1.4 million refugees from Turkey, 900,000 from Syria, and about 600,000 from Iraq and Afghanistan. And when you look at some of these countries, like not just Iraq and Afghanistan, but like even like Syria, which has had an ongoing civil war for over the last decade, and they only have a population of about 20 million people currently. To have close to 1 million people flee from Syria and migrate to Germany as refugees, that is a very large number. It's a fair part of their population has now pretty much moved to Germany. And just what has been the government's response to all of this? During the 2015 refugee crisis, when over 1.3 million refugees streamed into the European Union, most traveling from the Middle East, the German chancellor at the time, Angela Merkel, she made a famous quote when she said, "We got this," when she was asked about how Germany was going to accept the majority of migrants who were crossing into Europe. And there's a lot of people who feel such a simplistic answer was almost trivializing many of the problems now faced by the country, including the expanding ghetto areas such as the one here in East Germany, and the straining of the limited social resources of the country. And some solutions to this problem that have been put forth are for Germany and other European countries to do a better job screening the incoming refugees, and to basically refuse entry to those without a valid reason to be seeking asylum in the first place, and also for the UN to build more internationally monitored refugee camps closer to the migrants' home countries, and with the hopes that that would stem the flow of refugees into Europe as a whole and also into Germany. And this year alone, it's expected an additional 800,000 people will seek asylum just within Germany. And as long as there are conflicts somewhere in the world, it doesn't look like the flow of refugees will slow anytime soon, especially since Germany has a very liberal process for people seeking asylum. Basically, anyone in the world facing prosecution because of their race, religion, nationality, or belonging to a special group can seek asylum in Germany. And you actually don't even have to do that, because once you're in the country, you cannot be deported if doing so may place you in any sort of danger. If you were to say you are in fear for your life, up until now, Germany will not deport you, or your chances of being deported are very slim. And there's also other indications this experiment in the open borders may not be working out too well. There's a Wall Street Journal article from 2017 which states approximately 74% of all suspected pickpockets in Germany were foreign nationals. That's nearly 3 out of 4 people who are caught pickpocketing, and that seems like an excessively high number. But you also have to keep in mind too that foreign nationals can include almost anyone, even people from Japan or even the United States can also be considered a foreign national. So there's no single group that is being singled out here, and I'm just providing this information just for context purposes. And I'm now approaching the Gorlitzer Park area, and they have this pretty neat looking church building that's coming up. And the even the church buildings out here, they're not immune to graffiti. But it kind of made me wonder, though, if instead of a Christian church, if it were a mosque, if they would have the same problems. And I sort of doubt so, but anyhow, and it's certainly not the first church I've seen in Berlin that's been vandalized by graffiti. And then just across the street is the Gorlitzer Park that's going to be coming up pretty soon. And unfortunately, I was unable to walk directly into the park with my camera because the drug dealers who seem to hang out at every entrance, they become quite agitated. And I basically had to wait until I walked further into the park before I could begin filming. And all of the drug dealing and whatnot is basically being done in broad daylight. So I don't think they really care too much about the police, and you kind of have to watch out for yourself out here, basically. And after seeing how run down parts of Berlin are, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the people living here didn't wish for a time when East Berlin was under Soviet control, because it's very unlikely the drug dealers, junkies, and pickpockets of Berlin would have lasted very long back then. And I think they would have got rolled up pretty quickly. And that's not necessarily an endorsement for communism, but it's just my observation that this part of the city doesn't seem to be functioning all that well. And here's just kind of one more example of that. Just coming up, there's a lot of people just like this where they camp out under these bridges, and I would say just in this area there's hundreds of people just doing this same thing. And that kind of raises the question of, if there's so many of these government programs, then why are people living like this? Can Germany afford to take care of the poor people it already has, not to mention when they continually let more people in the country that need assistance? So they, in a lot of ways, they do seem to be overwhelmed. And coming up, this is the church building that I was talking about earlier. And I really couldn't find out very much information on the building itself, other than it was destroyed during World War II and then rebuilt. And it now looks like the church building itself is just being remodeled. And hopefully in the future they won't have the graffiti problem. So when they're finished with their remodeling, it won't look all defaced like it does over here across the street. And here's a better view of the front part of the church. It's a fairly large building. I would say it's about 5 to 6 stories tall. And I'm now just going to walk over to the Gorlitzer Park, which is just right across the street. And normally I would just walk in with my camera if I was anywhere else. but of course that might not be such a good idea here. But anyhow, I just want to know what everyone else thinks about all this. Do you think Germany's open border policy is a good idea? Do you think the Berlin ghetto will continue to expand, or do you think things will get better here? Will Berlin become the next Detroit of the Far East? Please leave your comments below. And I would also be interested to hear from people who live in this area. How is it like living here? How have things changed? And here's the inside of the Gorlitzer Park. And overall, it was a quiet, uneventful day once you get inside past the drug dealers. Though I still don't think I would recommend this area for a picnic, as there are plenty of other nicer parts of Berlin to explore. And anyhow, that will conclude my tour of this part of East Berlin, and thank you for watching.